Welcome, everyone, to an episode of the Self-Made Strategies podcast. I am your host, Tony Lopes, and today we have a very special guest with us. He was runner-up for the 2016 World Championship of Public Speaking, Aaron Beverly. How are you, Aaron?
I'm great, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. This is a really phenomenal opportunity. I'm really excited about this episode. I know we are going to get a lot out of this. Before we even get started, you were the runner-up for the 2016 World Championship of Public Speaking, which is Toastmasters International's World Championship of Public Speaking.
Yep.
We'll get into that a little bit later, but I just want to say before we even kick off the episode that I watched your video, which is on YouTube, of the entire speech.
Yeah.
You can find it basically by Googling your name, Aaron Beverly.
Exactly.
Pretty high on the list there. Amazing speech.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Really, really cool. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But Aaron Beverly is a project manager by trade. That's your day job at JP Morgan's Corporate Investment Bank. And you specialize in operating model enhancement, business technology adoption, and user training development.
Yep, that's correct.
Tell us a little bit about your day-to-day, what you do at JP Morgan.
So in my day-to-day, I am a project manager, and project management can mean a lot of different things. But one thing as a project manager that you must get down pat if you're going to be a successful project manager is communication. Right. You can get so far with communication, and I only can speak to this because I've experienced it. When I first got my job as a project manager, I had zero project management experience.
Wow.
All I had was a desire to be a project manager because I saw some people come into my former business and I thought what they were doing was really cool. So I had the urge to be a project manager, but didn't have the experience. So I actually used my communication skills and public speaking and Toastmasters as a way to get into the good graces of people who were project managers at the time. So I networked, and they saw my ability to speak, they saw my ability to lead and communicate to other people, and obviously they saw my ability to network. So that led to a job at project management.
That's amazing. So really quickly, you were already a member of Toastmasters at that point?
Correct.
And you had been, how long had you been a member?
At that time, I had been a Toastmaster for 4 or 5 years at that time.
Okay. And so through Toastmasters, you had developed both your networking and your public speaking skills.
Exactly.
Awesome. You know, you have these college kids who break out into these groups to try these skill building exercises, for lack of a better term. And then the room tends to get really loud and sort of bombastic, and it's hard to bring it back down. And the way that you brought them back was really interesting to me. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so one thing as a trainer, if you're going to get your audience engaged, you have to command the room. Mm-hmm. And there are different ways that you can do that. But my favorite technique is to get people to clap. So I just do a series of commands and prompts. Clap one time if you can hear my voice, and I start to clap. Clap 2 times if you can hear my voice. And when people start hearing that clapping, they say, oh, well, what's going on? Why are people clapping?
Right.
There are different techniques that you can use, but that's been my favorite one. I figure that is the most effective, and that's the reason why I always use it. But you can just make other noises. People tend to do and people will actually start to finish the beat because it's that tune or jingle, whatever it is. I don't know what the exact song is called, but you have to command the room and you have to get your audience's attention back on you.
Right.
So there are many ways you can do it, but those are my favorite ways.
Yeah, that was really effective too. By the time you had them clapping twice, to your point, they were starting to quiet down. They were probably at about 20% noise level from where it was before that. And then at the 3 claps, you could hear a pin drop.
And what's funny is that if you notice that I did it multiple times as I had them break out and talk to people. When I did it the first time, I got up to 3. Then the second time I did it, it was only 2 times. And then the last time I did, I only told them to clap once, and attention was brought back to me.
Because then they knew it.
Exactly. Right. They've been trained to say, okay, if I hear the clap, let me get silent.
It's incredible. Yeah, it's really cool to see. It was actually the first time I had experienced something like that, and I thought it was really interesting. It really stood out in my mind. So Aaron also combines his communication expertise with your love of travel. Aaron's engaged audiences in 5 of the 7 continents, which is amazing. And you spread the message that there is more that can bring us together than what can drive us apart. Tell us a little bit about that message overall.
So that message really comes from my experience. I grew up in Philadelphia. I grew up in North Philadelphia. And my world was very small at the time. I knew my family, I knew my neighborhood, but that was about it. As I got older, I realized that there is more to life. There are other people. There are other races. And no, they're not evil. They're not bad. They're not somebody that you need to avoid. Then the same thing for other religions, same thing for other cultures. These are things that you don't know them when you're younger, so you tend to be afraid of what you don't know. It's only by going out into the world and meeting these people and talking to them that you start to learn that these are just regular people just like you. They have families, they have likes, they have dislikes, the same as you. Now, what you like and what you dislike may differ, but at the same time, you can still appreciate the humanity of other people. And that is what I try to get across to people when I speak. I am an African-American man. We may not have the same background, but we can appreciate each other's humanity.
Right. Which of the 5 continents have you spoken on? I'm guessing the Arctic is...
Yeah, Antarctica, you can definitely assume that one hasn't been done just quite yet.
Right.
But obviously North America.
Okay.
South America, I did go to Peru about a couple years ago.
Wonderful.
Then I actually only went to Europe in 2016. That was my first time going to Europe and actually engaging an audience in Europe. Mm-hmm. I went to the UK. Then Asia was my first time in Asia was 2014. And that was actually for a speech contest. So the speech contest has taken me all over the world. Then the only ones that I need to check off the box are Africa and Antarctica. So I have done Australia as well. That one I did way back in 2009 when I was in college.
Wow. Now, what has it been Toastmasters that's taking you to all of these?
So not all of them. So like I said, college took me to Australia. It was a part of an immersion program, and that is when my world actually started to expand. Like, wow. I'm thousands of miles away from home, and these people are not the same type of people that I'm used to dealing with, but at the same time, it's awesome.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about your 2016 World Championship of Public Speaking speech, which is entitled, and I'm starting it from here and going until I end it, Leave a Lasting Memory, using as few words as possible, and strive with every fiber of your being to avoid being the type of person who rambles on and on, with no end in sight, more likely than not causing more listeners to sit there and think to themselves, oh my goodness, can somebody please make this stop? Leave a lasting memory, using as few words as possible, and strive with every fiber of your being to avoid being the type of person who rambles on and on, with no end in sight, more likely than not causing more listeners to sit and think to themselves, oh my goodness, can somebody please make this stop? That's the full title of the speech. And by the way, if you look it up on YouTube, the gentleman who reads the speech is the most stoic, deadpan. He's reading the title of the speech. Hilarious to introduce you.
Yeah.
First and foremost, how did you come up with that title? Which I think is brilliant, because when you craft something that you're adding that level of humor into, and somebody else is going to be reading it, and you don't know, I'm assuming you didn't know who was going to be reading it, or did you know that?
I knew the day before.
Okay, but you didn't know when you crafted it.
No.
Right. So, brilliant, hilarious. I mean, the crowd laughs with reason. I think it's really well crafted. But yeah, how did you come up with that to begin with, and then go into the speech itself? Tell us about the experience.
So I'll actually back up a little bit just to provide people who are listening on the podcast, provide them some context. In the speech contest, there is a certain tradition that you have to do in order to introduce the speakers who are participating in the contest. You have to say the person's name, then read their speech title. Then read their speech title, again, then say the person's name again.
Okay.
So that is the formula. That is the method.
So that's why it's repeated twice.
That's why it's
Right.
repeated twice. And a lot of people used to say, especially speech coaches, they would say, you can't have a very long title because your speech titles need to be memorable so that the audience can remember it. And there was even a person who wrote a book called How to Win the World Championship of Public Speaking. Mind you, this person never competed in the World Championship of Public Speaking, so that annoyed me right there. But I remember reading that and thinking to myself, you know what, everybody's saying that you can't have a long title. I'm going to do the best that I can to prove them wrong.
Wow.
So I had gotten the idea from another Toastmaster and another speech competitor. I saw his video on YouTube, and he had it was about 30 words long.
Okay.
And people were laughing.
Yours is 57.
Mine is 57, so I took his 30 and I upped it. But the thing was, it got people's attention. And for me, that is what I wanted to get. I wanted to get people to just remember not the speech title itself, but the feeling. Because I don't place as much importance on a speech title. For instance, I'll ask you, have you ever heard of the speech entitled Normalcy Never Again?
No.
No? Well, it's very interesting because it's a world famous history defining speech. And I'll just give you the first line of this speech that most people will recognize. I have a dream that one day. Martin Luther King's
By the
speech.
way, yeah, I've only heard that speech referred to, and I'm not kidding about this, as the I Have a Dream speech.
Yep.
Nobody calls it by the title.
Nope. When Martin Luther King first wrote the I Have a Dream speech, he wrote it under the title Normalcy Never Again.
Wow.
But people remember it not by the title of what it was, not by what it was called, but the feeling that people got from it or what people took from it. They took I Have a Dream and they ran with it, and they've been running with it for over 40 years, 50 years now.
Right. Right. Wow. Brilliant. By the way, that for our listening audience, and I hope I'm not being too know-it-all-y here, so I apologize in advance. But basically, that's called evocation, right? It's the evocation, the feeling that you get when you hear something. It's used frequently in marketing, for example. So when you have like a one-line thing that you remember, just do it, right? Immediately brings something to your memory and immediately hits like on your subconscious and you understand something. That's called evocation. So, but in that speech, you do say, quote, just because you say more doesn't mean people will remember what you said. And that's on your LinkedIn. Again, that's something, that tagline is something that you brand yourself personally on. I think it's a great quote. So to that point, how do you craft your speeches to be concise and memorable, similar to the I Have a Dream speech?
Yeah.
I already can't remember the name of it.
So for me, my speech preparation process, I start by thinking, one, who is my audience? Because to me, that's the golden rule. You can create the best speech in the world that has all of the things that a speech should have. It can have humor, it can have things that people remember, it can have audience participation, but if you give that speech to the wrong audience, they're not going to take it away, and then it's a complete failure. So for me, I always think about who is my audience, and then once I know who my audience is, I go to the next important step, and that is knowing what I want my audience to either do, think, or know by the time I'm done speaking.
Okay.
So I call it DTOKS, my do, think, or know summary, or in short, detox.
Nice.
Because that's exactly how it works as you're crafting your speech. So I have this summary, and it has to be 10 words or less of what I want my audience to do, think, or know. If it goes beyond 10 words, then you need to refine your message because it's probably too complex. If you can't get it down to 10 words, then it's way too complex. Now, the reason why I call it detox and why it works in a similar way is because when you're crafting a speech, you want to put so much in it.
Of course.
But you have to cut things out. And that summary, it will help you find out, okay, this content right here, it's great, but it doesn't fit with what I want my audience to do, think, or know.
Okay.
So I have to take it out. And as you're crafting your speech, it is basically acting as a barrier for what goes in and out of that speech.
Okay. Now, can you give us an example of a do, think, or know summary that you've crafted that comes to memory?
Yep. So I'll give the example of the World Championship speech. So in that speech, my do, think, or know summary was to make the words you say count. That was it. Just make the words you say count. And the way that I crafted my speech, I had so many other stories that I wanted to include in there, but I had to think, is this an occasion where the words counted? And if that wasn't a case, then I had to take it out. I'm trying to remember what other story I tried to put into. I remember. So there was this one incident that I had in the lunchroom where I work. And this gentleman, he's trying to buy a bottle of water, and he's just looking at this bottle of water, and he's wondering, well, he's looking at this bottle of water, and he looks very confused. And then he asked the cashier, do you know where the calories are? And I'm just thinking to myself, well, it's water, it doesn't have calories. And I thought it was funny at the time, but then as I'm putting it into this speech, I'm like, so number one, it's not as funny as I thought, because every time I give it, nobody laughs, because obviously you didn't laugh. But then,
Point proven.
But secondly, it's not a matter of he made his words count. He just said something that he was confused by, or just didn't quite understand the rules of caloric intake when it comes to water.
Right.
So I had to take that out because it didn't fit that message and that summary of make your words count.
Right.
So those are different things that you can do, that summary is something that you can use so that you can have it as a barrier for what goes in and out of your speech.
Right. Right. Brilliant. I mean, I think that's really practical advice, and also there's a tiny bit sprinkled in there of do what you say or practice what you preach, because it's hard for you to be an evocative and great public speaker if you're going up on stage and, to your point, the audience isn't engaged, and they're staring at you with blank stares, and they're not laughing at lines that you think, I'll have to pause here for a few seconds because they'll be roaring in laughter. And that happens a lot. I mean, even with me, for example, I'm an attorney, and I do all these other things on the side, media projects and podcasting and stuff. And there's stuff that sometimes on occasion I'll do some public speaking, CLEs, or I'll do seminars or webinars, all that stuff, for personal branding. And as I'm crafting a speech or preparing a PowerPoint or something, my mind, to your point, is you have to educate but entertain.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how good your knowledge is, how great the material from a substantive point of view, from a factual standpoint, the material is. If you can't make the audience enjoy the experience, it's going to be the most painful hour of their lifetime. And that's what they're going to remember you for that feeling, to your point, right?
Exactly.
So it's not going to be a good brand builder for you. So I do think of the same thing. And sometimes I'll throw in, a pun here or there, and I'll think like, oh, this is going to crush that room full of tax lawyers and accountants. And frequently it does not. And again, they're not the best sample size in terms of humor.
Yeah.
But,
That's very true.
But I say that jokingly, guys, calm down, it's okay. But it is funny that sometimes, you're writing these things out, and in your own head, because you're so close to the material, you're like, oh yeah, that's going to get a laugh. And dead silence a lot of times. Deer in headlights, and you're like, okay, move on to the next piece.
Yeah. So that actually ties into the other parts of my speech preparation process. So when I finally have my summary down and I start to draft my speeches, and then I'm seeing what can go in and out based on that summary.
Right.
Once I have my draft, I'll audio record myself.
Brilliant.
And a lot of people hate this step because they don't like the way they sound, but people get used to it. That's the way you sound. There are things that you can do to improve the quality of your voice, but you are not going to change your voice.
Right.
But once I listen to it and I get it to a state where I think it's ready to go in front of an audience, I take it in front of an audience, and that is when you really get to see what works and what doesn't,
right.
or hear what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
I will record my speeches on video, and that way I can see what the audience is seeing, and that way I know if I can hear their laughter in places, I'll look at myself on the video and say, okay, what was being done facial expression wise, what was being done hand gesture wise, how did I look when I said that line, how did I look when I made them react that way,
right.
How did I sound when I made them react that way. And you, on the other side, when they don't laugh at something, and you have that awkwardness, that awkward feeling inside, say, okay, I expected a laugh here, but I didn't get it, so okay, I'm just gonna keep going.
Right.
But you look at that too. How did you look? How did you sound? Is it because you didn't deliver it a certain way? There have been times when I delivered a line a certain way and nobody laughed,
right.
But then I paused just a little bit before delivering the punchline, and it got the laugh that I wanted. And then it's also a matter of room size. Smaller audiences, you're not going to get as much laughter,
right,
as you would a larger audience.
The entourage effect. Right?
Exactly.
Where in a room of 2,000 people, like your 2016 World Championship speech, all you need is like 100 or 150 to start laughing, and it's almost like the standing ovation.
Yep.
Like 5 people get up, and we all start looking at each other like, all right, I don't want to be the guy that's sitting. We all got to get up.
Exactly.
Now, right?
Exactly.
So, right.
And laughter's contagious.
Right.
So when you hear more people laugh, you'll laugh. And in a smaller room, people are more reserved. They don't want to be the person that just laughs out loud. Even if it was something totally hilarious, they don't want to be the one that caused the outburst or broke the silence.
Right.
So if you can get a good laugh in a small room, you have something good there, because that is when people are the most reserved, and that's when you know that your line really killed. And it doesn't just apply to humor. It also applies to making people react with shock. It also implies with making people react with the "aww," those type of reactions. So not just humor. So let's clarify there that it's not just a humor thing that you're listening out for, but just any general reaction.